Hi, everybody. Welcome to this podcast. I'm really excited. I have Jem Godfrey here, who's in the UK, and he's a member of Frost. Of course, he's called the front man. Although I want to give a shout out to the other members of the band, the classic.
No,
No? Okay,
nah,
forget.
bother.
Well, being a guitarist, I do play keyboards. My son plays a lot of keyboards, and I'm really, actually, that's one of the things that really struck me about this album. I've been listening to it for a couple days. The new album's called Live in the Wires. It's a double album. Frost has never done this. This is a new adventure for Frost to do a double album, and not a double live album, but a double album, concept album, even at that. Um, so, where should we start?
Um, in terms of how it came to be, you mean?
Sure, sure.
Well, I think it was sort of I think every prog band really needs to do. Oh, I say every prog band needs to do one, but I always had an idea that Frost should do a double album and that it should probably be a concept album, because I think if it's a double album and it's not a concept album, then I think you just it's quite a risk that people are going to want to listen to that much music from one particular band without some sort of storyline, I think, to hang things off. And so I think it was just I hadn't really had an idea up to this point that maybe would justify a double album. But then it came up with this phrase, "Life in the Wires," and for some reason it just sort of generated a load of interesting visual ideas in my head. What could it be and what would it be about? And I've always had a love of radio, like old AM radio and long wave radio, and um it's kind of always been in the family with these old. And I used to sit and listen to these old radios when I was growing up as a kid, and you kind of get all this static, and then you tune through, and you could hear as far away as like China and Russia from the UK. You could hear like miles and miles and miles. So you'd kind of hear these little tiny sort of snippets of voices and bits of music, and and it was all a bit distorted and sort of slightly sort of unnerving in a way, because you didn't know who these people were, where they were, or what they were saying. So it was but I always found it sort of slightly comforting that I sort of felt that in my little bedroom in England, that there was a whole world out there full of people talking all the time. And so I think it just I always had that in my head for years and years and years. And I just, with the Life and the Wires thing, I was thinking, wires, and we used to call it, the old radios here used to be called the wireless, you know. And so I just thought, what if there's like a sort of character in out there in sort of long wave land that wants to be heard, and I sort of threw a little throw forward at the end of our previous album, Day and Age, which has a bit of static at the end of the whole album when the last track fades out and there's a little voice that says, "Can you hear me?" And I thought, wouldn't it be great if this new album starts with that bit from the end of the previous album? So it's like a sort of spin-off series in a kind of way. And so it's sort of with those sorts of ideas, I suddenly realized I was having lots of different, exciting ideas. I think, there's a lot of music I could write around this idea, I think. And so I kind of felt a double album would be the way to go. So here we are.
I've been listening to it for the last couple of days, and I'm very, very impressed. I'm just going to get up my little review. I have some notes. One phrase I'll use for the album is a feast of an album. Of course, it is a two-album project, but there is so much that I really loved about it. A shout out to all the musicians in the band, but since we have you here, Jem, the keyboards, man, you're really good on the keyboards. I noticed in one of the promos you were mentioning you wanted to sort of approach this album. Well, it was a different approach to the album right from the start, would you say? Like you didn't
Yeah.
want to do just a typical kind of album. You didn't want to do solos or something. You like there are a couple solos in the album at least, but
Well,
you
the previous album, we had a no solos policy, so
okay.
that was kind of what it was. So we decided that we would kind of row back on that a little bit, because it was fun to do. It was fun to do an album, where we always try and put some sort of limitation on each album just to kind of give us something creative to push against.
Hmm.
The previous one was let's not do any solos, so we have to actually bother to write some decent arrangements. So that was that. And then with this one, I just thought, you know what? It's sort of we're getting on for 20 years since we did our first album, Million Town, in 2006, 2005. And so I sort of thought, we're kind of, it feels a little bit like we're coming full circle. So why don't we just, let's have a bit of fun. It's because, we, we're a prog rock band. I mean, let's not try and pretend we're anything other than that. And so as a result, it just felt like the natural thing to do to open up the taps a bit and, and all of us have a bit of a play. And it was great fun to do because of that.
So would you say then this album, as compared to your last album, you had the limitation of no solos. This album, you said, okay, well, let's be more freer. But were there still some limitations you wanted for this double album?
I don't think for this one, this was the first one. I just thought, let's just go for it. Let's just have fun, and I think because that was the sort of the what's the word, the kind of mantra of the very first album was let's just go mad and have fun, and people always used to say when they heard it, it just sounded like we were just having a good time, having fun playing our instruments and enjoying it. And I think it was the same with this one. It was kind of a chance for us to kind of just let's just play, we can play, let's play. And
Hmm.
so it was really that, and I think you can kind of hear. I've heard a few people saying now that you can sort of hear us having a really good laugh, doing this and enjoying being musicians and enjoying sort of each other's company and playing off each other. And I think it's kind of yeah. It just I hope it sounds like a bit of a sort of bit of a musical party, really, a bit of a celebration of us going, wow, we're still alive, let's play.
Well, I was impressed by the album's breadth. Like at first, I thought the first few songs I'd heard by you guys were very high energy. It kind of reminded me of the Police, Synchronicity. The drumming is really powerful. Great use of compression, actually. I mean, this is it's kind of a geeky thing to say, but your album, you guys use compression really well, and it made me think too that compression is a real partner for pop music. Pop music and compression really go together, and this album is has definite pop feelings, but it reminded me also, like I say, of the Police, Synchronicity. I was thinking of Rush, even in the '80s, for example, Power Windows. There's a lot of sort of magnificent, that's a big word, magnificent uh, projections in some of the songs. Very, and again, it's using artfully the compressor. These have these really big. I don't know how else to say it, but and then you've got a lot of still slower songs, and there's a lot of piano being featured where you're playing acoustic piano. And yeah, it's a nice balance. It's how do you feel about the album now? You've kind of the dust is settling a bit.
Relieved. I kind of it was what's been interesting is with the previous four albums, when I finished them, I couldn't stand them. Because you spend so much time mixing and living with them and playing the thing over and over again. I was sick of them all. There's a weird thing about this one. I don't know whether it's because it is a double album, but I can still listen to it. So I don't know whether that's a good sign or a bad sign. But in terms of the compression, I think we're all of us in the band. We are kids of the '80s. We all grew up then. Those were our teen years, and I think that's sort of it's always the music you grew up with that has the biggest kind of influence, I think, on you. I mean, we're all massive fans. We actually are massive fans of the Police, but I mean, I love Trevor Horn's work and Terry Brown. I mean, those when you say Power Windows and Signals, I mean, I love those. I know there's these kind of with Rush, you have these eras where people go, "Oh no, I hate that. I don't know." For me, I really liked the '80s era because it obviously had lots of keyboards. But I know Alex Lifeson didn't particularly like that. But it's kind of they do kind of sit with you in your subconscious, I think, and when you get a chance to be able to sort of make your own music, I think there's always a chance that you're gonna kind of reference the things that you were excited by when you were when you were growing up as a kid. So I think for me, yeah, it definitely has those sorts of little nods to those albums and that era and those producers, I think. So compression is definitely our friend. Yes, I can hardly recommend Distressers. Buy lots of Distressers, and that will save your day.
I'd like to know about your writing process, your compositional process. Um, how does it begin? Like for example, some musicians do it in their head. I just interviewed a musician who said he doesn't get near a tape recorder or anything. He does it all in his playing his guitar, coming up with the ideas, and he won't even explore the tones and everything until he's in his studio. Whereas others will, they'll come up with the riff, they'll video themselves so they don't forget it, or they do a little 4-track demo. Everyone's got different ways. How do you do it?
I use my phone, my
Mhm.
invaluable. I mean, before phones were, before they were like when they were phones, I used to have a dictaphone. So I used basically just carry around a little. I've always had a little kind of portable recorder. So basically, I mean, I kind of the way I put albums together is by creeping up on them, and then they creep up on me in return. So it's sort of as I'm walking through the house, there's a piano over there, and I've got this couple of pianos in the place. So I just sort of I'll have a noodle because it's nice to have a little play. So what starts out initially as a practice, doing some scales, becomes a few chord sequences, becomes a little bit of a solo, and sometimes out of those moments come ideas. And it's like, oh, well, that's nice. And then as long as I've always got my sort of whatever my recording medium is to hand, I can quickly grab that moment. And then they all just sort of sit on my phone for a year or so, and they sort of, accrete and get bigger and bigger. And then one afternoon, I'll sort of think, oh, I'll just go through my phone, see what's there. And sometimes there can be things I've completely forgotten about, and you think, oh, did I do that? That's great, and then one idea, you listen to that and think, oh, that would go really well with this idea, or there'd be something else I'm working on. And so it all sort of, it's like a patchwork that puts itself together, a jigsaw, I suppose. And then from that point, um, I'll sort of start to look at everything and think I've probably got enough material to maybe start working on an album, and then I'll come into the studio and start sort of tracking stuff and playing around. But most of the time, it's these really low quality these low quality WAVs on my phone that are a bit distorted and terrible singing, and but the vibe is always the thing that's exciting, I think. And it can be even little like words, and like Life in the Wires, for example, I came up with when I was on a walk. So there's me on the phone going, some title idea, Life in the Wires, and it's just that it's like having just a sort of long uh a sort of library of moments, and then trying to make sense of what they all meant a bit later. I mean, there are some times when I listen back to something and it's intelligible, so I've
Mm.
got no idea what the idea was, but hopefully that doesn't happen too much.
Who is the voice that we hear?
On the phone,
Yeah. Oh no, the radio, on the album, the
oh,
new
the
album.
album. Well,
Yeah.
he's an international amount of mystery, and
Okay.
you can't possibly divulge his. It's not. It's definitely not me. It's not anybody in the band. It is somebody
Okay.
separate, but he likes to keep a very low profile.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's
It's
a.
not Andy Edwards, is it?
Oh no, he's from Birmingham. No, that's a slightly
Okay.
different accent.
Okay, I don't know the accents. I guess I know Liverpool, that's about it. Yeah, double albums. It's interesting. Pink Floyd, of course, has made double albums. Yes, had a double album. Genesis had a double album, of course. Even the Beatles, were they one of the first bands to do a double album? Do you know?
I think they probably were. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Are you a Beatles fan?
Oh, huge! Yeah, I love the Beatles. I mean, I kind of
Mhm.
it's sort of the latter era thing. I get a little bit lost, I think, after Sergeant Pepper, really, because it becomes a bit they get a bit grumpy, don't they? And I think I quite liked it when it was all a bit, uh, a bit more whimsical. Because I think I prefer by the sounds of it, from what I can gather, I'm probably more of a Paul McCartney fan than a John Lennon fan writing wise. But obviously, I know that the camps are very, very firmly divided. But yeah, no, I mean, they were again. I had Sergeant Pepper was in the house when we grew up, and that even though it was whatever it was, before I was born, but becoming aware of it like a decade after it had been released. It's George Martin as well, the incredible sonic universe that they create or they created. I mean, that's always been inspirational. Yeah, definitely. And the madder the better, because you can be mad and it works. I liked how George on being for the benefit of Mr. Kite, how that he would record all those pipe organs and the little bits. And apparently I think they threw all the cut up bits of tape in the air, and then George put them all back together again and went, well, that's it. And I love that idea. It's brilliant.
So tell me a little about, you're surrounded by keyboards there. This is your practice studio at home, or?
No, this is the studio. My studio is at home, so
Great.
I just work. It's in sort of in bits at the moment because I'm having a bit of a move around. So there's lots of metal over there. Ignore the metal if you can see that. I don't know
No,
on
no.
the screen.
Abacab, piece of art back there, just like me. I've got
Yeah,
that.
I've got the they're the four. It's the four different versions. It's the four
Oh,
album You can see that the 4 album versions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I heard about that.
They were. Who was the artist? My brain's gone.
I don't know if it
Anyway,
says on there. Yeah.
he did a reprint of the 4 different covers. So these are limited edition prints. But yeah, I had
Oh,
to get them.
cool. Nice. Very nice. Yeah. Let's see. You can see behind me. Vangelis, or Vangelis, as a keyboardist, who are your heroes?
Um, well, obviously, Tony Banks figures quite heavily. A big,
Yeah.
big, big Tony fan. But
Hmm.
actually, weirdly, it's more his latter days. It's funny you've got Abacab on the wall there. I mean, I again, it's one of those albums that I really like, and a lot of Genesis fans don't. Um, because I really liked the kind of the mission statement behind that album, which was for it to be quite sort of brutalist, and jagged, which is like the album cover is sort of depicts, and to separate where they come from. Otherwise, they were scared that they'd get caught up in the great clear out, that punk instigated. So, but I quite like the fact that Tony Banks uses lots of distorted sort of sounds on that album, and it is quite stark and spacious. And actually, Peter Gabriel 3, I mean, Melt, I mean, that's another album that I loved
Yeah.
greatly
Yeah.
and still do, and that's Larry Fast playing keys on that. And he's another great sort of sonic designer, I wasn't really much of a fan of, in terms of when you mentioned Yes, I'm not really much of a Wakeman kind of player.
Or
I
maybe
was
Tony Kaye or Patrick Moraz or
well, possibly. I think probably Yes as a band really weren't. Me and John Mitchell have this, who's the guitarist in the band. We always have this. He's a very much a Yes fan and not much of a Genesis fan, and I'm a big Genesis fan and not much of a Yes fan. So we kind of have these spirited debates about which band is better, and neither of us ever win. So, but I loved Keith Emerson as well. I was a big Emo fan. I quite
wow.
liked the kind
Yeah.
of bombastic way he did things. So I'm in between. You got Tony Banks, who's very reserved, and you got Keith Emerson, who's just like a hurricane. And so, I quite liked the contrast between the two musicians.
Right. Yeah, that's true. His energy was really like that. Um, what about since we mentioned these bands in the 80s and we lived through it, we're probably a similar age, and I remember how Prague was kind of just it seemed like Prague was dead and gone. Like I remember getting into Genesis and Yes and Saga and stuff like that, and I remember Yes broke up, and then it felt like wow, I just got into Prague and suddenly it's going to be dead. How terrible! But then the '80s really they came back with a vengeance. I think Genesis really made the strongest show. I mean, actually, Yes did too with 90125, but Genesis was very consistent. Yes was like put an album out and then 4 years later is another album. It's just sort of not really focused, but they had a lot of pressure, I guess, in the business in the industry. How is there any pressure like that for you guys?
I don't think so. But well, definitely not, because I think obviously we're not Genesis or Yes sized. So, the pressure's not really is not really on us as a band to kind of to behave in that sort of manner. I think obviously, and the music industry has changed so much since those days, in the fact that you could make being in a band a career. And I think an awful lot of musicians these days probably can't. I mean, I think a lot of musicians have other things that they do. Maybe they write for other people or they have other jobs. There's kind of I think there's only a very rarefied set of bands, in the sort of dream theater area where that's what they can do all the time, and I think for the sort of lowly likes of us clattering down in the weeds, like for example, John Mitchell in the band, he's in about 100 different bands. So he makes that work for him. Craig Blundell, our drummer, is always out with Steve Hackett or Steve Wilson. He tours a lot with people. Nathan King is obviously he's in Level 42 with his brother, and he's in a variety of other bands that he plays with. So he has all these different lives, and I think that's basically what we all have to do. We have to kind of be musicians that put on different hats, and so that's in a way that's a bad thing. But on the plus side is it means there is no pressure. We are very very lucky in a position that we were signed to Inside Out, and they basically just let us deliver albums when we're ready, rather than going, come on, you've got an hour. So
Right. Yeah.
that's quite good. So it's yeah, I mean the pressure's not really the only pressure we do really have is to tour. Everyone's always pressuring us to go out live, and the problem we've got with that is financial. It's just a lot of money. Take a production on the road for, a month across a bunch of continents. So that's the only real pressure point for us, more than we do because we can't afford it,
Uh-huh.
basically.
Yeah, it's yeah, very expensive. Yeah, all the traveling and everything. Did you enjoy it though? Did you enjoy any touring that you have done?
Yeah, we did. We did a very small UK tour a couple of years ago for the previous album, supporting that, and that was actually really good fun because it was, we had a bus and we were basically like a little traveling hotel, with minstrels leaping out at the end of the day doing our little gig and then back into the bus and off we go, and that was good fun. When it's not been fun is really early on when we're all in our own cars and we're all driving up the freeway and and it's raining and you load your own gear in, you load your own gear out, and so it's kind of we have definitely done that trajectory of the classic, all the musicians in the back of the van going up the road with the equipment, so we've only just about got out of that phase. But I
Mm,
think it's chicken and egg, if we toured a lot more, then maybe the band would have a higher trajectory. But the problem with that is, if we need to be able to afford to tour to do better, which would then have an effect of having more money for us to be able to make the albums, and then so it's a kind of weird chicken and egg catch-22 situation. But
hmm.
yeah, it has been fun. We do have a laugh when we tour. Yeah,
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, the one of the videos you just put out, you were using a lot of footage from, I think it was 2007 or something like that.
yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
And you were all having fun and yeah, it was a lot of light moments, I guess, for you.
Again, we're not one of these sort of very scowly bands. We have a laugh on stage. We like to play around and joke about a bit, and because I think we're entertainers, aren't we? Really, I think that's our job.
Now, speaking of entertainers, I mean, you can challenge your audience too. And I noticed in your album, there is some dissonance. Like I like King Crimson and how they incorporate dissonance. I think they're probably one of the great examples of, using dissonance. And in time signature wise too, you start off the album with some really aggressive, sort of, yeah, basically it's not, la-di-da, here's the album. It's very aggressive, some of it. And then you have your quieter moments. So where do you think that comes from? Your kind of the dissonant elements that you use in your album.
It comes from bands like Crimson. I think there's definitely because dissonance, it's always against it's the sort of light and shade thing about arranging, isn't it? It's having dissonance that which then pushes into melody, or quiet which pushes into loud, or loud which suddenly stops to quiet. I think that's kind of it's one of our old sort of arrangement tricks of having one extreme next to the other and switching very quickly between them. So I think it's just a sort of it's an old writing tool, isn't it? I think just to kind of stop people from getting bored.
Right, right. Now you're working with Inside Out, the music label,
Yeah.
the record label. Is this the first time you worked with them?
No, this is actually bizarrely, this is our fifth and final album with them.
Mm.
We signed, we've always been signed with them. They've been very good to us. It's been a sort of 18, 19-year career. So all the albums, Million Town, Experiments, Falling Satellites, Day and Age to this one. Had a 3 album deal, and then we re-signed for 2 more albums, and then this is the fifth, and it would appear final. So
Mm.
yes, we've kind of we've had a lovely relationship with them. They've been very good to us, and they've really pushed this one. So I don't know what happens next. If is the to be honest.
Is it just a matter that the contract expired, or did they just sort of say, oh, I don't know. How did it end up now?
Well, it's always. I was actually there this morning. Funnily enough, I went up there to sign some lyric sheets for a special edition of Prog Mag that's coming out.
Hmm.
But no, it's very amicable. I wonder whether, as you were saying just now, economics of running a label. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying for a second that they're in trouble, but I do wonder whether they are looking at the bands that maybe don't sell as much as other bands and going, right, well, let's see what's happening. No one said anything, so I don't know. I mean, as I say, the relationship's very strong and we've had a good time. But at the same time, if that is it, then that's fine as well. It's kind of it's not there's no sort of animosity, and we will continue our journey in a different form, I suppose.
Are you the main songwriter in the band, Jim?
I am for this one, yeah. I mean, I kind of Million Town I wrote all of. Experiments I wrote quite a lot of. Falling Satellites and Day and Age were a bit more collaborative with me and John Mitchell, the guitarist. Um, he's been very good for me because he writes really fast and I write very, very slowly. So what's been
Oh,
good for him is he's kind of like he helps me speed up a bit, which has always been quite good. But then for this one, because I had the idea and it was quite strong in my head about what I wanted to do, it didn't really seem appropriate or necessary to co-write with with anybody on this because I knew what I wanted to do. So yeah, the majority of this one we co-wrote two songs for this album. One's called Strange World and one's called Starting Fires, which is the closing track. So so yeah, apart from that, it was all me on this one. But that's not to say we won't co-write on anything else we do in future. It's just this for this particular project, it wasn't necessary.
and what about the album graphics? I mean, obviously it's a gatefold LP, so you got a lot more freedom. The designer, has a little more of a playground to play with. How did that go for designing the graphics and everything for the album?
It was great. I mean, and that was another one of the reasons for doing a double album is because I remember, as a kid and as growing up in the 70s and 80s, specifically ELO's Out of the Blue album and opening it up and having the whole spaceship in the painting and in it all being. And I remember just putting that album on and I would just sit for an hour and just boggle at this picture, this painting that, in the gatefold center of it. And again, these things you take with you through life. I always wanted to have my own gatefold album, really. I think that's kind of another one of the reasons for doing a double. And it was the same when it arrived. We've got some special edition red vinyl versions, and that they arrived about a month ago, I think. And so I opened it up here in the house, and I had the hairs on the arms went up, and the goose because it was like, oh, this is my double album. So yeah, it's he and Carl Glover who did the artwork. He's obviously he's done Porcupine Tree and Stephen Wilson and Marillion Marbles. He did all those artworks. He's a genius. He is a genius. And what I like about the way he works is he doesn't. There's no CGI. There's no Photoshop. It's all the things he does are photographs. He sets up real situations. And and works with that way, a bit like Hypnosis did, Storm Thorgerson, and he's very much I had to say he performs his own stunts. There's
Hmm.
not very much computer work going on. So he created this kind of fabulous world. The radio on the front actually I found it on eBay. It cost me £15 in February, and I ordered it and it arrived. And so I basically just said to him, this is the radio that the character has and listens to, and I met up with him and went, there you go, do what you want to do. So he photographed it and got it all beautifully looking, immaculate. And yeah, his work has been brilliant with it. He really he made the old battered radio come to life, and it's kind of got like its own life of its own, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, looking at that graphic of the AM radio, this old radio is so cool looking. It's very retro, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that is
yeah,
what it looks like. It's really beaten up, but when it arrived, I just
yeah.
thought, oh, it's perfect.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I wonder if the guy who sold it to you, he probably has no idea that
That's
this,
true. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that'd be funny.
yeah, yeah. That's cool. So, what else? Like, I guess we have about a few more minutes before Zoom cuts us off. But is there anything we haven't talked about that you would like to bring up and discuss? Or
Um, no, we've talked about touring. We've talked about the end of the contract with the record label. We've talked about keyboard players. We've talked about production. It's been a remarkably focused conversation, I
oh,
may say.
that's good. That's good. I'm getting disciplined at this then.
I
Yeah,
can't think of
yeah,
anything else to say, really. I mean, we've done
yeah,
touring. We've done the artwork,
yeah,
equipment.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like laser guided. This.
And I noticed too, you've got some guitars, so you do play guitar as well, eh?
Yes, I do. It's the white actually there's a track three called This House of Winter on the album. I played the guitar solo on the white one, which is a
Nice.
Schecter something or other. I don't know what it is.
Oh
Some
yeah.
80s. But it's basically what I liked about it is it's got a Sustainiac pickup in it, which you're a guitarist, aren't you? So you'll know what that
Yep.
is.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know these things existed because I've just been struggling with an EBO all these years, going, oh,
Okay.
it's like an EBO, six EBO. So I immediately got one,
Cool.
and uh,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. What
Yeah.
a brilliant trick. So the
Yeah.
guitar solo, it kind of was inspired by that guitar and the fact that it does all that kind of feedbacking stuff. So I just sort of I played it that way, and
Cool.
yeah, it was really inspiring sound.
There's one more thing I want to bring up for the interview, just and we can wrap up, I guess. You mentioned Trevor Horn.
Yeah.
So did you actually produce this album? Like you were at the controls recording, or did you have an engineer, or was there a producer per se, or
It's no, I did the whole thing because
okay.
my previous life before I did Frost was doing pop records. So I kind of done a lot of production over the years, and working with computers and engineering and recording and orchestras and everything else. So for me, it's just an extension of my I hate the word, but my skill set of the things I can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that was another good thing about it. I just set up a studio at home and recorded everything here, and Craig was on tour, so he sent his drums remotely, and that stuff would just get emailed in. And Nath was the same. Nath emailed his bass parts in. John Mitchell came here and sat over there, and we sort of had a few days just playing guitar and mucking around. But everything else was I sang here. I just sang at this just here, and yeah, just I just recorded it and mixed it at home, which is how I've worked for 20 years, really.
Yeah. 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 And Craig Blundell on the drums, man, does he ever hit those drums?
Yeah, he's a good
Yeah.
lad. I think this is
Yeah.
one of his best performances. I mean, of all the Frost work, this is definitely, I think, his best work he's done with us. He was so inspired. He came at it with so many amazing ideas.
Yeah, he was
I,
using those long, what are those long drums? I heard on couple of tracks. Forget the Pink Floyd are kind of famous for using them. These really long
well, the Octobar,
rototoms.
Rototoms. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, rototoms.
Yeah, it's little actually it was little toms that don't have backs on them. It was more that kind of,
Oh, okay.
or that sort of, it's like a very ding 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 high pitched
Yeah.
kind of just a sort of array of toms. And yeah, he kind of yeah, he give him anything to work with and he'll go, yeah, fine. So again, it was just a pleasure to
Yeah.
have the privilege of having him play on my songs, really.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned Trevor Horn, so I guess as a producers go, he's probably one of your influences. Would you say inspired you a lot?
I think so. Yeah, I mean Trevor, but I really like 90125 and Trevor Raven. That particular Yes album is a that's the one that me and John completely agree on. Um, but yeah, I think Trevor Horn was very sort of influential, not only in terms of how he would make things sound, but also just his kind of his question everything ethos. Why is this the way everybody does it? Why do we have to do that like that? Why can't we do it like that? And I've always sort of tried to approach production in the same way of, why do we have to have mellotron in this prog band, and why do we have to have such and such a sound, or so it's always helped me inform. So it's always helped inform me, I should say, of sort of breaking the rules a bit or questioning why things are the way they are. And
I know, I swear I've heard that on this album. Listening to this album, I hear that thought process that you're talking
yeah,
about because
yeah.
I'm constantly surprised how the songs flow. What becomes kind of like, oh, this kind of like a solo, but it was very compositional. It sounds like you really went all out on that this
Well, I
album.
think it's not treating anything as sacred. It's if it's a guitar solo, does it have to stay a guitar solo? What's to say halfway through it doesn't become a keyboard solo, or something else happens? And that's always kind of that's what I think that's us having fun is when we sort of say, well, why does it have to do that? Why do we
Hmm,
have to
right.
fade out? Why can't and it's always those it's having those sort of moments. It's a sort of irreverence for your own material, really, not taking ourselves too seriously.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've heard it. Let's see. I was talking to Adam Elm of Mommy Heads. He thinks prog takes itself too seriously sometimes.
Definitely. And that was the thing, humor is a thing that's really been lost, I think. in actually not just prog, but I think quite a lot of music these days is quite not overly serious. But I do think, because as human beings, humor is part of our everyday lives. I think, there's
Hmm.
always something that makes us all laugh.
Hmm.
I don't see, and prog, prog has a rich history of Peter Gabriel, and the bands like Genesis. There was always an element of humor running through it all. I
True.
think it's kind of
Yeah.
nice to sort of try and put a bit of that in because it does seem to be very serious, and a lot of people they're still doing their sort of angry COVID albums. And I kind of thought, why
Yeah.
don't we not do that? Again, it's the questioning thing, well, let's not do that. Everyone's doing that. Let's do that. Let's have
Yeah.
something a bit more light, a bit more hopeful.
Yeah. My kids, I love introducing them to Monty Python.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
love those movies. That's great. Well, let's see, oh yeah, we're down to less than a
Oh
minute,
wow.
so
Yeah.
we'll wrap up. And I really appreciate your time, Jem, and it was wonderful to meet you. And I love the new album. I think I'm glad you guys had fun making it because I'm having fun listening to it. And yeah, so have a good rest of your day, and hopefully we'll chat again in the future again. And shout out to the
Definitely. Well,
rest of the
thank you.
band.
I've really enjoyed it, and as I say, great questions. Very, very beautifully arranged and organized, and you've extracted the maximum information out of everybody in the perfect amount of time. So I commend you, sir.
Oh, thank you. Cool. Okay, well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you in the future, hopefully.
No problem at all. Good to meet you. Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye
See
bye.
ya.